Millions once lived in cities we never knew existed. For centuries, the deep jungles of our world were thought to be empty, places where only small, scattered villages could survive. That story is now a relic of the past. A technological revolution is shattering our oldest assumptions about ancient civilizations. This video will show you how a tool called LiDAR, a form of laser scanning from the sky, is peeling back the forest canopy to reveal lost urban networks of staggering scale. You will see how invisible light is rewriting history, forcing us to reconsider the population of entire continents and the very nature of human ingenuity. How could societies supporting millions vanish so completely from memory? What does their rediscovery teach us about our own relationship with the natural world? By the end, your understanding of wilderness and civilization will be fundamentally transformed. What does a forgotten city look like when it is finally seen again? The jungle itself became the greatest guardian of its own secrets. To understand the scale of the discovery, you must first appreciate the sheer impossibility of the task that came before it. For more than a century, archaeologists dedicated to uncovering these stories worked under conditions that would defy most modern expeditions. Their world was one of perpetual twilight under a solid green ceiling, where visibility ended just a few meters ahead. Every step was a negotiation with roots, vines, and thick mud. Mapping a single ancient plaza could take an entire field season of painstaking work, clearing undergrowth inch by inch, only to reveal a small fraction of a potentially vast urban plan. It was archaeology conducted almost entirely by touch and localized deduction. From this ground-level perspective, the evidence often pointed to isolated communities. A cluster of pottery shards here, a single earthen mound there, these finds suggested small, autonomous villages living within, but not fundamentally altering the great forest. This interpretation solidified into a powerful and persistent idea, particularly regarding the Amazon basin. The narrative told of a pristine wilderness, a so-called green desert, where human presence was always light and transient. This was not a careless assumption. It was the only logical conclusion drawn from the fragmented evidence available when your entire field of view is perpetually filled with leaves. This paradigm did more than just underestimate ancient populations. It subtly framed tropical forests as places inherently hostile to large-scale, complex society. The story we told ourselves was that civilization required open plains, predictable rivers, and clear lines of sight. The dense, chaotic jungle, it seemed, could only ever be a backdrop, not a stage for greatness. This fundamental bias, born from a literal lack of visibility, became embedded in our history books for generations. We were trying to read a continent-sized novel by looking at a few scattered letters buried in the soil. The truth required a way to finally see the whole page. The breakthrough came from a perspective no human could ever achieve on foot. To find what was lost, we had to stop looking from within the jungle and start looking from above it. The tool that made this possible is called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. In essence, it is a form of laser scanning, but to call it just a scanner is like calling a telescope just a magnifying glass. It is a technological leap that fundamentally changed the rules of the game. Imagine a specialized system mounted on a small airplane or drone, flying in precise lines over the endless green. It does not take photographs. Instead, it acts like a hyper-fast, ultra-precise measuring device. It emits hundreds of thousands of harmless, invisible laser pulses every single second. These pulses rain down on the landscape below. Most hit the leaves and branches of the canopy and bounce right back, giving us a detailed map of the treetops. But a crucial fraction of those beams find their way through tiny, natural gaps in the foliage. They continue their journey downward until they strike something solid, the actual ground, a stone wall, the slope of a man-made terrace, and then they race back up to the sensor. The system's true genius lies in its timing. It measures with incredible accuracy the minuscule difference in time it takes for each pulse to complete its round trip. A pulse that hits a tall tree returns quickly. A pulse that slips through to the forest floor takes a fraction of a second longer. By compiling millions upon millions of these precise time measurements, the computer can calculate the exact distance to every point it struck. The result is not a flat picture, but a breathtakingly detailed three-dimensional point cloud, a digital ghost of the landscape where every single return pulse is a dot in space. The next step is where the magic happens for archaeologists. Using sophisticated software, they can digitally filter out all the points that returned from the vegetation. What remains is a bare earth model, a pristine map of the ground surface, as if every single tree, vine, and bush had simply vanished. Suddenly, the human fingerprint on the land becomes starkly visible. What looked from the ground like a random, forested hill is revealed from this digital vantage point to be a perfectly pyramidal platform. A gentle, meandering ridge becomes the straight, raised foundation of an ancient causeway connecting two sites. Subtle geometric patterns emerge across kilometers, showing grids of farmland, reservoirs, and ceremonial centers. This process is completely non-invasive. No trees are cut, no soil is disturbed. It is an act of remote sensing that respects the jungle while revealing its deepest secrets. In the time it would take a ground team to meticulously survey a single city block, a LiDAR plane can map an area the size of a modern metropolis. This is the scale of data that has rewritten the story. It allowed researchers to stop looking for isolated clues and start seeing the entire system. The laser did not just find lost cities, it revealed that they were never truly lost at all. We simply could not see the forest for the cities. The first major revelation arrived not as a theory, but as a digital avalanche of data. In 2017, a consortium of researchers aimed their LiDAR instruments at a vast tract of Guatemalan jungle known as the Maya Biosphere Reserve. The goal was modest: to get a clearer picture of a few known sites. What returned was nothing short of a cognitive earthquake. When the vegetation was stripped away in the digital model, the landscape beneath told a story of staggering scale and complexity. The map lit up with more than 60,000 individual structures that no modern eye had ever seen. These were not just monumental temples, though there were plenty of those. The true shock was the sheer density of the everyday, the overwhelming evidence of ordinary life. Small residential platforms appeared by the thousands, clustered around courtyards and plazas, revealing neighborhoods that stretched for kilometers. Raised stone causeways, like ancient highways, connected everything, weaving settlements into a single, integrated fabric. This was the definitive end of the isolated city-state model. The LiDAR showed a near-continuous urban and suburban landscape, a low-density metropolis that covered an area comparable to modern countries. The civilization's sophistication became visible in its infrastructure. The data revealed intricate networks of reservoirs and canals, a masterful hydraulic system that captured rainwater to sustain populations through dry seasons. It also showed imposing defensive walls and earthworks, hinting at periods of conflict and complex political rivalries that textbooks had only guessed at. The immediate, undeniable impact was on population. Archaeologists could now count for the first time a credible number of households. The math was inescapable. Previous estimates for the classic Maya period had to be multiplied, not by a fraction, but by several times. The consensus now points to a region that was home to many millions more people than we ever imagined. This single project transformed the Maya from a collection of brilliant but separate ceremonial centers into a vast, interconnected society with a formidable agricultural base, intense trade, and a level of regional organization that rivaled any contemporary civilization in the world. The jungle was not a barrier to their growth, it was the foundation of it, meticulously shaped and managed to support a thriving world. If the Maya Reserve was a revelation, it was only the opening chapter. The same technology was about to probe an even greater enigma, a place where the very idea of large-scale Amazonian civilization was considered a fantasy. Yet the story of laser scanning is not confined to a single civilization or continent. This quiet revolution in perspective is echoing through jungles across the globe, each new scan adding another chapter to a radically revised history of the tropics. In Cambodia, LiDAR flights over the iconic temples of Angkor Wat did far more than map the monuments. They revealed an astonishing urban sprawl radiating outward for dozens of kilometers, a low-density metropolis of reservoirs, canals, and neighborhood temples. The data confirmed that Angkor was not an isolated wonder in the jungle, but the pulsing administrative and spiritual heart of an empire that managed its landscape with breathtaking hydraulic precision. Half a world away, in the dense rainforests of Honduras's Mosquitia region, a different kind of mystery emerged from the digital mist. Aerial scans identified the clear outlines of terraces, plazas, and possible pyramids in a remote river valley long rumored to hold a lost city. While archaeologists urge caution, the LiDAR signatures provided the first tangible evidence that such places were not merely legend, but likely reality, waiting for ground teams to confirm their stories. But perhaps the most paradigm-shattering work is happening in the Amazon basin itself. For generations, the dominant narrative described it as a green desert, incapable of supporting large, settled populations. LiDAR is systematically dismantling that idea. In parts of Bolivia and Brazil, lasers are peeling back the canopy to reveal vast geometric earthworks, complex circular village layouts connected by straight roads, and clear evidence of enriched soils that suggest intensive, long-term agriculture. These are not the footprints of small, nomadic tribes. They are the signatures of structured, populous societies that actively sculpted their environment. What links these disparate discoveries from Southeast Asia to Central and South America is a powerful, unifying thesis. Tropical forests worldwide were not passive, pristine wildernesses that humans merely visited. They were dynamic, managed landscapes, actively shaped and densely inhabited by sophisticated cultures over millennia. The laser is showing us that the greatest monument these civilizations built was not a single temple, but the forest itself, engineered to sustain life on a grand scale. This realization forces a profound and difficult question. If these societies were so successful, so populous, and so ingeniously adapted to their environment, what could possibly have caused such a comprehensive and enduring silence to fall over their world? The true power of this new vision is that it forces us to rethink a very old word, civilization. For centuries, we have measured ancient societies by a checklist written from the perspective of places like Egypt or Rome, a list that includes monumental stone architecture, written records, and densely packed urban cores. LiDAR reveals a world that scored highly on that test in some places, like the Maya, but in others, it presents a model so different it requires us to write a new definition entirely. Nowhere is this clearer than in the Amazon. Here, the laser scans do not reveal towering stone pyramids or vast paved plazas. Instead, they map a pattern of what archaeologists are now calling garden cities. Imagine clusters of settlements, each organized around a central circular plaza, like a series of interconnected neighborhoods. These clusters are not isolated. They are linked by remarkably straight, wide causeways that cut through the forest for kilometers, forming a clear regional network. This was not a collection of random villages that happened to be near each other. This was intentional, planned urban design on a continental scale, but the city was only half the story. The true genius of this system is visible in the landscape that surrounded these plaza communities. The data shows clear evidence of enriched soils known as terra preta, or dark earth. This is not a natural soil. It is a human-made super soil, created over generations by adding charcoal, compost, and waste to create incredibly fertile ground that can still be found today. The scans also suggest the outlines of managed orchards, groves of fruit and nut trees, and even what appear to be ponds for raising fish. This paints a picture of intensive agroforestry, a sophisticated food forest where hundreds of useful plant species were cultivated together in a system that mimicked the natural jungle but was far more productive. This is the revolutionary idea. In the Amazonian model, there was no sharp line between the city and the farm, between the urban and the rural. The entire landscape was the city, and the city was a garden. It was a form of low-density urbanism where homes, roads, and ceremonial spaces were woven directly into a managed, sustainable, and biodiverse food system. This civilization did not clear the forest to make room for fields of a single crop like maize or wheat. They shaped the forest into a productive partner, a living larder that could support large, settled populations for centuries. It challenges our most basic assumption that civilization must conquer nature to thrive. Here, the greatest achievement was not conquest, but a profound and enduring integration. This discovery does more than add population to a map. It asks us a deeper, more unsettling question about our own modern world. What does it mean that societies which achieved such a balanced relationship with their environment ultimately faded from view, leaving behind a silence so complete we mistook their masterpiece for untouched wilderness? This transformation from a digital point cloud to a revised population count is a process of careful, methodical translation. To understand the staggering new numbers, you need to see how archaeologists convert pixels on a screen into people from the past. It begins with the most fundamental unit of life, the home. In the stripped-down LiDAR landscape, what often appears is a simple, rectangular or circular raised platform. These are the footprints of ancient houses, the residential foundations where families lived, worked, and slept. The laser reveals them not as isolated ruins, but by the thousands, sometimes the tens of thousands, spread across the digital map like a galaxy of human habitation. But a platform is just a shape. To give it life, researchers turn to a principle called ethnographic analogy. They look at traditional housing structures used by descendant communities in similar environments, and they combine that with hard data from the few platforms that have been fully excavated on the ground. From this, they can build a reliable model. A platform of a certain size and construction might have comfortably housed a single extended family, perhaps 5 to 10 individuals. This is not a random guess, it is an estimate grounded in both archaeology and anthropology. The next step is pure, awe-inspiring arithmetic. If a single LiDAR survey identifies 60,000 structures and a conservative estimate assigns 5 people to each, you are suddenly looking at a population of 300,000 souls within that specific mapped area alone. But the real revolution lies in the pattern those 60,000 points create. Previous ground surveys might have found a few clusters of platforms and logically assumed they represented separate villages that rose and fell at different times over centuries. The laser's panoramic view destroys that assumption. It shows the causeways connecting these clusters into a continuous network. It reveals that the settlement density is consistent across huge swaths of land. This critical evidence suggests these houses were not occupied one after another, but simultaneously. It was not a handful of villages, it was a sprawling, interconnected metropolis living at the same moment in history. The final leap is extrapolation. Researchers take the population density calculated from their LiDAR sample an area they now know with certainty, and apply it to similar ecological zones that have not yet been scanned. This is how a detailed map of a few hundred square kilometers can revise the estimate for an entire region, pushing numbers from hundreds of thousands into the millions. The process turns a collection of digital dots into a resonant echo of a living, breathing society. It shows us that the silence we perceived was never truly empty. It was simply waiting for a technology that could listen at the right scale. With these new millions now visible on our maps, the mystery only deepens, demanding an answer to the most pressing question of all: what happened to them? The story of the Casarabe people is a perfect illustration of how a single technological leap can resurrect an entire civilization from near total obscurity. For decades, archaeologists working in the Llanos de Mojos, a vast seasonal wetland in the Bolivian Amazon, knew of scattered, low earthen mounds. These mounds hinted at human presence, but the evidence was frustratingly sparse. The dominant view was that this challenging environment, which floods for months each year, could only support small, mobile groups who adapted to the water's rhythm. The Casarabe culture, dated from around 500 to 1400 AD, was considered a curious but minor footnote in the pre-Columbian story, a society defined by its limitations rather than its achievements. Then the laser eye looked down. A LiDAR survey conducted over this region did not just add details to an existing map, it generated an entirely new one. Where ground surveys had documented isolated mounds, the digital bare Earth model revealed two colossal urban centers, each spanning several square kilometers. These were not random clusters of huts, they were meticulously planned settlements, laid out with a geometric precision that spoke of central authority and deep architectural tradition. The most striking features were the concentric rings of defensive earthworks, massive moats and ramparts that encircled the core of these sites. These were not mere property markers, they were formidable statements of power and protection, engineered on a scale that would have required the coordinated labor of thousands. Within these defensive rings stood the civilization's monuments, not built of stone but of expertly packed earth. The scans showed immense platform mounds, likely serving as foundations for elite residences or civic buildings, and startlingly tall, conical pyramids that would have dominated the flat wetland horizon. These structures transformed the physical and social landscape, creating a tiered world that literally elevated community leaders and rituals above the seasonal floods. But the true genius of the Casarabe was in their connectivity. The LiDAR data traced a network of straight, raised causeways, stretching for over a dozen kilometers in some cases, linking the major centers to smaller subsidiary settlements and to vast, clearly defined agricultural areas. Parallel canals ran alongside many of these roads, managing water flow for transport, drainage, and likely for fish cultivation. This was the signature of a highly organized society that did not just live in the wetlands but actively redesigned them. They transformed a challenging, waterlogged savanna into a productive, engineered landscape of towns, farms, and highways. The scale of Earth moving implied by these features is almost incomprehensible, pointing to a social organization capable of mobilizing and sustaining large-scale labor projects over generations. In a single sweep of laser light, the Casarabe were transformed. They went from being a scattered collection of mound builders to architects of a major, complex civilization. Their population estimates, once thought to be in the modest hundreds, are now revised to suggest tens of thousands of people thriving within this managed environment. This case study does more than add another civilization to the historical register. It fundamentally changes the setting of the story itself. It proves that the Amazon was not a uniform blanket of wilderness, but a mosaic of distinct, engineered landscapes, each shaped by a different culture with its own vision for how to build a world. If the Casarabe could create such a profound legacy in the wetlands, what other societies waiting just beneath the canopy might have done the same in the deep forest. These raised highways tell a story of intention, not accident. To construct a perfectly straight causeway 50 kilometers long through dense, uneven jungle requires more than just labor. It demands a vision that can hold its shape across an immense distance. Surveyors had to establish and maintain a precise line of sight, likely using methods we can only guess at, perhaps involving smoke, aligned markers, or celestial navigation. This speaks to a specialized class of engineers within these societies, individuals who possessed and applied advanced geometric and spatial knowledge. The causeways were not just paths, they were statements of territorial unity and administrative reach. They transformed travel from a difficult, seasonal slog into a reliable, all-weather network. A farmer could transport goods to a central market, a messenger could carry information between leaders, and ceremonial processions could move with purpose and spectacle. This connectivity fundamentally changed the social and economic logic of the region, turning isolated nodes into an integrated system. But the true mastery of these civilizations is often found not in how they moved across the land, but in how they managed the water upon it. In environments defined by torrential rains and seasonal flooding, water was both the greatest threat and the most vital resource. The laser scans reveal their answer, a hidden hydrology of breathtaking complexity. Across the Maya lowlands, LiDAR maps show vast grids of canals and raised fields. These were not simple ditches, but a carefully calibrated agricultural engine. Canals drained excess water from fields, while also serving as nutrient-rich channels for fish and turtles. The excavated soil was piled into adjacent raised planting beds, creating fertile, well-drained plots that could produce multiple harvests a year. This was a closed-loop system of astonishing efficiency, turning a challenging wetland into a prolific breadbasket capable of feeding millions. In the Amazonian sites, the water management takes on a different, equally ingenious character. The scans show networks of canals often running parallel to the long causeways. These canals likely served multiple purposes. They drained the roadways to keep them passable, provided transportation routes for canoes, and may have been used for controlled fish farming. Researchers also identify what appear to be large, artificial ponds and reservoirs, strategically placed to capture and store rainwater for the dry season. This is not the infrastructure of a society merely surviving the elements. It is the signature of one actively sculpting the hydrological cycle to its advantage. They were not at the mercy of their environment. They were in conversation with it, engineering solutions that provided food security, transportation, and stability. This web of roads and waterways did something profound to the social fabric. It bound together communities that might otherwise have remained separate. Shared infrastructure requires shared maintenance, which implies social coordination, agreed-upon rules, and likely some form of centralized authority to plan and direct such large-scale public works. The ability to move food, goods, and people freely across a region would have stimulated trade, allowed for the specialization of crafts, and enabled the spread of ideas and cultural practices. A potter in one village could reliably obtain clay from another. A farmer could trade surplus maize for tools or textiles. This economic interdependence, facilitated by the physical infrastructure, created a resilient and interconnected society. The causeway and the canal were the physical threads that wove individual settlements into a coherent civilization, proving that what we once called the wilderness was, in fact, a carefully managed and deeply connected human landscape. The scale of this coordination forces us to ask, what kind of leadership, what shared belief system, could motivate and organize such monumental, communal effort over generations? The true measure of any civilization is not found in its grandest temples, but in its most fundamental act, feeding itself. A city of millions cannot be built on ceremony alone. It requires a deep, enduring partnership with the land. This is where the laser scans move from mapping structures to decoding an ancient agricultural language written directly into the earth. The evidence shows these societies moved far beyond the simplistic idea of slash and burn, developing food systems of such sophistication and scale that they fundamentally reshape our understanding of what a farm can be. In the rolling hills of the Maya world, LiDAR reveals a landscape meticulously sculpted to defy gravity itself. Long, elegant terraces cascade down slopes, turning steep, erosion-prone land into stable, fertile staircases for cultivation. Each stone-reinforced terrace acted as a miniature dam, capturing precious rainwater and rich topsoil that would otherwise wash away in the tropical storms. This was not just farming, it was a form of long-term environmental engineering, a commitment to preserving the productive capacity of the land for generations. It transformed entire mountain ranges into vast, productive gardens. In the low-lying wetlands, a different kind of genius emerges from the digital models. The scans show expansive grids of narrow, parallel ridges and canals, a geometric pattern stamped across the landscape. These are raised fields. By digging drainage ditches and piling the nutrient-rich muck into long, elevated beds, farmers created perfect conditions for crops like maize and manioc. The canals provided constant moisture, regulated temperature, and teemed with aquatic life that could be harvested, while the muck itself, constantly replenished from the ditches, acted as a perpetual fertilizer. This system was so productive and sustainable that some of these ancient fields could theoretically still be planted today. But the most profound agricultural signature is also the most subtle. When analysts look closely at the LiDAR data, they can sometimes detect patterns in the forest itself, not in structures, but in the very composition of the tree canopy. In certain areas, the distribution of economically valuable tree species like Brazil nut, palm, or fruit trees appears in dense, non-random clusters. These are the ghostly imprints of anthropic forests or garden cities in the truest sense. They represent a form of agroforestry where the jungle was not cleared but curated. Over centuries, generations of people selectively planted, protected, and propagated useful species, gradually transforming the wild forest into a managed, living pantry. This was agriculture woven directly into the ecosystem, a food forest that provided nuts, fruits, timber, and medicine while maintaining biodiversity and healthy soils. This trio of techniques, terracing, raised fields, and forest management, reveals a central truth. These civilizations did not see the jungle as an obstacle to be cleared for farmland. They saw it as a partner to be understood, enhanced, and integrated. Their agricultural strategy was one of amplification, not replacement. They built a food web that could support dense urban populations, not in spite of the tropical environment, but precisely because they had learned to work within its rhythms and harness its inherent productivity. This sustainable abundance raises a haunting counterpoint to our modern agricultural models, and it makes the eventual silence of these gardens all the more poignant. What happens to a world so carefully balanced when that balance is suddenly, irrevocably lost? A map of a city tells you nothing about its lifespan. This is the profound and critical puzzle that LiDAR presents, a breathtaking snapshot frozen in time but without a timestamp. The laser reveals a sprawling metropolis of 60,000 structures, but were they all alive with light and sound at the same moment? Or is this a palimpsest, a single image containing centuries of sequential construction, decay, and rebuilding? If these buildings represent generations spread across 1,000 years, then the population estimates collapse. If they represent a single, vibrant century, then the numbers hold, and our history must be rewritten. The laser gives us the where with stunning clarity, but it is silent on the when. To answer this, science must perform a delicate act of correlation, marrying the view from the sky with the evidence buried in the earth. This process is known as ground truthing, and it is where the digital revolution meets the timeless, meticulous work of the trowel. Archaeologists take the LiDAR map, pinpoint a specific, intriguing structure, perhaps a residential platform at the edge of a newly discovered causeway, and they go to that exact coordinate on the ground. There, they open a small, precise excavation unit, a window into the stratified history beneath the feature. Their goal is to recover material that carries a chemical clock. Fragments of ancient pottery whose style evolved in known sequences over time, pieces of charcoal from cooking fires which can be subjected to radiocarbon dating to yield a probable age range. Even organic residues left on tools can provide clues. Each test pit is a point of data, a single pin on the timeline. By repeating this process across a landscape, at different types of structures from grand pyramids to humble homes, researchers begin to stitch together a chronology. They can ask, does the pottery from this residential cluster match the style from that ceremonial center? Do the carbon dates from this canal's construction layer overlap with the dates from the plaza it connects? The emerging picture from regions like the Maya lowlands is one of stunning synchronicity. The vast majority of the residential platforms, the road networks, and the agricultural terraces all point to the same broad period, the Maya Classic period, spanning roughly from 250 to 900 AD. This was not a slow accumulation over millennia, it was a concerted, continent-scale flowering. In the Amazon, similar ground truthing at the Casarabe sites and others is painting a parallel picture. The earthworks, causeways, and plaza complexes are yielding dates that cluster in the centuries just before European contact, what scholars term the late pre-Columbian era. This temporal cohesion is the final, essential key that unlocks the new narrative of population. It proves that the landscape revealed by LiDAR was not a cumulative scrapbook of different eras, but a living, breathing census of a single, remarkably crowded chapter. The highways were bustling at the same time the reservoirs were full, while the terraces were being harvested and the gardens were in bloom. This confirmation turns a static map into a dynamic portrait of a world at its peak, a society operating at a scale and density we are only beginning to comprehend. With their timeline now firmly established, these millions of people cease to be an abstract calculation and become a historical reality. Their vibrant existence, therefore, makes their eventual absence all the more resonant, pressing us toward the next inevitable question: what powerful force could bring such a meticulously managed world to silence? This revelation forces us to confront a powerful and persistent myth. For generations, the story we told about places like the Amazon was one of a pristine wilderness, an untouched Eden that existed in perfect balance until the modern world arrived to spoil it. The LiDAR evidence delivers a fatal blow to this romantic but ultimately incorrect idea. The maps do not show a passive backdrop for human drama. They show a canvas that has been profoundly and intentionally shaped by human hands over thousands of years. The very ground beneath the forest tells this story. The rich, dark soils known as terra preta are not a natural phenomenon. They are a human invention, a testament to generations of careful enrichment and waste management that transformed poor tropical earth into enduringly fertile ground. Even the forest's composition whispers of this ancient partnership. The remarkable abundance and distribution of economically vital trees, like the Brazil nut, the cocoa, and countless fruit palms, do not follow a random, natural pattern. Ecological studies now suggest these are living legacies of ancient human selection and dispersal. These trees were planted, protected, and propagated because they were useful. Over centuries, this careful curation subtly but permanently altered the genetic and structural makeup of the jungle itself. This rewrites ecological history from the ground up. What European explorers first encountered in the 16th century was not a virgin wilderness. It was a managed landscape, a grand garden, that was already in a state of profound and tragic recovery. The true cataclysm had preceded their arrival by decades, traveling silently along indigenous trade routes far faster than any conquistador could march. Waves of introduced diseases like smallpox and influenza, for which the Americas had no immunity, swept through these interconnected populations. The demographic collapse was so swift and so total that the caretakers vanished, leaving their carefully tended world to grow wild in their absence. The tangled, overwhelming jungle that seemed so impenetrable to outsiders was not the default state of nature. It was the echo of a great and sudden silence, the sound of a garden growing unchecked after its gardeners were gone. This deep history is not merely an academic correction. It carries urgent, practical wisdom for how we approach conservation today. The old model of preservation often seeks to create islands of human exclusion, to protect nature from people. But the laser-scanned past suggests a different, more nuanced relationship. The incredible biodiversity and resilience of these ecosystems may not be a product of human absence, but of a specific, long-term form of human presence. Active, knowledgeable management over millennia likely enriched these forests, creating the complex habitats and soil conditions that support such a stunning variety of life. This perspective is profound. It suggests that the future of these vital places may not lie in keeping people out, but in relearning how to be a part of them again, in finding ways for human communities to be active, restorative participants in the ecological fabric. The laser has shown us that the line between the natural world and the human world is, and always has been, an illusion. The challenge now is to write a new chapter for that partnership, informed by the forgotten wisdom etched into the very land. Yet for all its power to map a continent from the air, the laser sees only in outlines and shadows. LiDAR gives us the skeleton of a civilization, the magnificent bones of its cities and farms, but it cannot restore the flesh and blood of daily life. It reveals the grand stage but leaves the play itself unwritten. The technology is utterly blind to the small, intimate objects that speak to human experience. A shattered clay pot holding the residue of a last meal, a polished jade bead lost from a necklace, a child's toy carved from bone, these lie invisible beneath the soil, waiting for the careful touch of a trowel. The laser cannot smell the incense burned in a temple, hear the echo of a market's chatter, or feel the texture of woven cloth. It provides an astonishing map of the where and the how big, but it is silent on the who, the why, and the deeply human how. This means the most profound questions remain untouched by the scanning beam. LiDAR might show us a towering pyramid, but it cannot tell us the name of the ruler who commissioned it or the specific prayers offered at its summit. It traces the outline of a vast plaza but cannot recover the words of the laws proclaimed there or the melodies of the music that filled it. The intricate social hierarchies, the nuances of family life, the stories told around evening fires, the very languages spoken, these are cultural layers the laser cannot penetrate. They are preserved only in the material culture, and if we are extraordinarily fortunate in rare inscriptions which require physical discovery, there are even physical limits to what the light can find. In regions where the jungle canopy is a nearly solid, multi-layered blanket, a significant percentage of laser pulses may never reach the ground. In other areas, certain soil types or thick layers of alluvial silt can absorb or scatter the signals, blurring the results. The technology provides an unparalleled starting point, a survey of staggering scope, but it is not the finish line. It is the ultimate guide, pointing archaeologists away from decades of searching in the wrong places and directly toward the most promising, answer-rich sites on the map. This partnership between the sky view and the ground view is where the true story comes together. Think of LiDAR as providing the bold, continent-sized question mark. Ground archaeology must then supply the punctuation, the periods, commas, and exclamation points of human history. A team might use the digital map to select a curious, isolated platform at the end of a newly discovered causeway. They travel to that exact coordinate, and through meticulous excavation, they might uncover a craftsman's workshop full of tools and half-finished goods, telling a story of specialized labor and trade. They might analyze soil samples from a LiDAR-identified terrace to learn exactly which crops were grown and how the soil was managed. Each test pit, each carefully brushed artifact, adds color, sound, and emotion to the laser's monochrome blueprint. So the revolution is not one of replacement, but of profound enhancement. The laser does not make the shovel obsolete. It makes the shovel infinitely more intelligent. It transforms archaeology from a search for needles in a continental haystack into a targeted conversation with the past. By saving generations of survey work, it allows researchers to spend their precious time, resources, and expertise not on finding where to dig, but on understanding what they find. This collaboration between the aerial and the earthly is what will ultimately translate those millions of digital points into a narrative of people, their ambitions, their beliefs, and the vibrant, complex worlds they built beneath the green canopy. But a map of the past is never just an academic document. It is a living artifact with profound consequences for the present. The power of this laser technology to reveal hidden cities carries with it a significant and immediate ethical weight, for it does not scan empty wilderness. It surveys the deep ancestral territories of contemporary indigenous peoples. The beams of light that pierce the canopy are illuminating not just forgotten stones, but the very foundations of living cultural memory. For many communities, these digital revelations are a powerful form of validation. When a LiDAR map shows a vast, ancient urban network precisely where oral histories have always spoken of a great ancestral city, it provides a form of evidence that can be crucial in supporting land rights claims and cultural sovereignty. It transforms a story passed down through generations into a data set recognized by courts and governments, affirming a continuous, unbroken connection to a landscape that outsiders once called empty. This potential for empowerment is one of the technology's most important promises, yet the same light that illuminates history can also cast a dangerous shadow. The precise coordinates of a newly discovered site, if released without careful guardianship, can act as a treasure map for looters seeking to pillage artifacts for the illegal antiquities trade. A single news headline about a lost city found can trigger a surge of unmanaged tourism, threatening to trample fragile remains and disrupt the quiet life of modern communities that call the area home. The science of discovery, therefore, cannot be separated from the ethics of stewardship. This has led to a vital evolution in how the work is done. Truly ethical LiDAR projects are no longer planned in distant universities and then brought to a region. They are built on collaboration from the very first conversation. This means involving indigenous communities as essential partners, not just as subjects or sources of permission. Their traditional knowledge is invaluable, often guiding researchers to specific areas of interest mentioned in stories. Their concerns about privacy, sacred sites, and physical access become the primary guidelines for the research plan. The goal shifts from mere extraction of data to shared cultural reclamation. A community might use the LiDAR maps to help plan sustainable cultural tourism on their own terms, or to educate their youth about the true scale of their heritage. The technology becomes a tool for them to tell their own story with greater detail and authority than ever before. This collaborative model recognizes that these landscapes are not abandoned ruins but chapters in an ongoing story. The laser scanner is a powerful lens, but who holds that lens and who decides where it points are questions just as important as what it finds. For this revolution in seeing to be truly complete, it must be guided by a deep respect for the voices of those who have never forgotten what lay beneath the trees. The light that rewrote history is now learning to see through water. The next frontier for laser scanning lies not just beneath the canopy, but beneath the waves. Researchers are deploying a specialized variant called Bathymetric LiDAR, which swaps the standard infrared laser for a penetrating green light. This wavelength can travel through clear, shallow water, mapping the contours of riverbeds, lake bottoms, and continental shelves. The goal is to find what rising seas or shifting rivers may have claimed. Imagine tracing the now drowned coastlines that ancient peoples inhabited, or finding the submerged foundations of villages built along waterways that were the lifeblood of these civilizations. This technology could reveal an entire chapter of human settlement currently lost to the deep, showing how populations adapted to and exploited aquatic environments, potentially adding another layer of millions to our historical maps. Yet the true bottleneck in this revolution is no longer data collection, but data comprehension. A single LiDAR survey can generate billions of individual data points, a digital landscape so vast it would take a human analyst years, perhaps decades, to examine every square meter with the necessary care. This is where a second technological partner enters the story: artificial intelligence. Scientists are now training machine learning algorithms to do what the human eye does, but at a computer's speed. They feed these AI systems thousands of examples of known features: a residential platform, a segment of causeway, a ceremonial mound, teaching them the subtle digital signatures of human engineering. Once trained, the algorithm can scour terabytes of data, flagging potential sites with incredible efficiency. What once took a career to map can now be processed in a matter of months. This synergy between laser and algorithm is transforming the scale of possibility. It enables what researchers call a continental archaeology, where entire regions, even countries, can be surveyed and analyzed as a single, interconnected system. We are moving from discovering individual cities to understanding vast, interacting networks. The AI can help answer more nuanced questions, like how settlement patterns changed with shifts in climate over centuries, or how trade routes evolved in relation to agricultural zones. It can identify common design principles across different cultures, suggesting shared knowledge or parallel innovations. This next phase promises more than a longer list of lost sites. It offers a deeper, faster synthesis, revealing the fundamental rules and rhythms of how humans built their worlds within tropical environments. Ultimately, this points toward a future where we may discern not just local histories but global patterns. By comparing the engineered landscapes of the Amazon, Southeast Asia, and Central America at an unprecedented scale, we might uncover universal strategies for sustainable living in challenging ecosystems. The laser provides the evidence, and the AI helps us see the connections, guiding us toward a new understanding of humanity's oldest and most enduring project, the art of building a home within the living world. The story of civilization now has a second, parallel volume written not in stone, but in soil and root. For generations, our historical imagination was dominated by a specific and powerful image: the great river valleys of the ancient world. The floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates, the life-giving Nile, the Indus, and the Yellow River, these are the landscapes we rightly call the cradles of civilization. Their model was one of concentration and consolidation. In these often arid environments, the reliable water source was a literal lifeline, drawing populations into dense, nucleated cities. Monumentality here was expressed vertically and permanently, in ziggurats of baked brick, in pyramids of cut stone, in massive walls that declared a clear boundary between the urban and the wild. Agriculture was typically intensive and focused, relying on irrigation to support vast fields of staple grains like wheat, barley, and rice. This was a brilliant, powerful adaptation to a specific set of environmental conditions, and its legacy shaped our very definition of what a complex society should look like. LiDAR forces us to appreciate that this was not the only definition. merely the one most visible to archaeology for the longest time. The jungle civilizations of the Americas and Southeast Asia were crafting a different answer to the same fundamental challenge: how to build a stable, prosperous society. Their model was one of integration and dispersion. Instead of clustering tightly around a single river, they created sprawling, low-density urban networks woven directly into the fabric of the forest. Their monumentality was often horizontal and terrestrial, expressed in the sheer scale of their landscape engineering. A causeway running 50 kilometers in a dead straight line is as profound a statement of power and organization as a towering temple. It just speaks a different architectural language. Their pyramids were built of packed earth, monumental not for their height alone, but for the staggering volume of soil moved by communal labor. Rather than clearing the forest to make room for monoculture fields, they perfected polycultural agroforestry, cultivating dozens, even hundreds of useful species together in a managed ecosystem that mimicked and enhanced the natural jungle. This was not a lesser civilization, it was a different one, equally sophisticated but optimized for a radically different environment. Where the river valley model sought to control and channel a precious, scarce resource, water, the jungle model sought to harness and manage an overwhelming abundance of biomass, biodiversity, and rainfall. This comparison is liberating. It breaks the single template. It demonstrates that human ingenuity is not a path but a spectrum. Civilization is not a specific checklist of features, a stone city with a written code and a standing army. It is an adaptive strategy, a set of solutions for living together in large numbers, and those solutions can look astonishingly different depending on the ground upon which they are built. The Maya, the Khmer, the Casarabe, they were not failed attempts to replicate Mesopotamia in the tropics. They were brilliant, successful experiments in creating a sustainable urbanism within the most biologically complex environment on the planet. Their legacy challenges a subtle hierarchy in our historical thinking, one that has long placed the so-called classical models above all others. By revealing the true scale and planning of these jungle societies, LiDAR does more than add population to a map, it adds dignity and depth to the human story. It proves that the drive to build complex, cooperative worlds is a universal human trait, one that flourished not in spite of the jungle's challenges, but because of the unique opportunities it presented. This new demographic reality transforms our understanding of their final chapters. When we believed the classic Maya were scattered in modest numbers, their societal shifts could be framed as a gradual decline. Now, knowing they numbered in the many millions, the same historical events take on a different, more profound gravity. A series of severe, multi-decade droughts in the 9th century was not merely an environmental stressor for a few city centers. It was a catastrophe unfolding across a vast, interconnected network of millions of people. The intricate systems of reservoirs and canals, so brilliantly engineered, now faced a test beyond their design. As water stores dwindled, the very foundation of their political and spiritual authority, the king's divine promise to bring rain, evaporated. The resulting political fragmentation and conflict, visible in LiDAR's defensive walls, were not the squabbles of petty rulers but the desperate struggles of entire regions for survival. The scale of the population makes the ensuing silence not a whisper but a deafening echo. It suggests a collapse of breathtaking speed and totality, where the social contract that bound millions together unraveled under the relentless pressure of a changing sky. This paints a picture not of a civilization fading away, but of one facing a convergent crisis where environmental change amplified every existing social fault line. Yet in the Amazon, the same laser that reveals vast populations also hints at a different kind of story, one of remarkable endurance. The very infrastructure that supported these large societies, the causeways, the managed orchards, and the enriched terra preta soils, points to a deep, generational knowledge of the land. These were not static societies, but dynamic ones that had learned to buffer against variability. The diversity of their food forests meant that if one crop failed, dozens of others could still provide. Their water management systems were designed for both flood and drought. This ecological sophistication suggests societies that may have weathered climatic shifts for centuries, adapting their settlement patterns and agricultural practices in a long, slow dance with their environment. Here, LiDAR acts as a historical seismograph, recording how these cultures moved across the landscape. By dating different layers of construction and mapping how causeway networks expanded or contracted over time, researchers can begin to trace a society's response to climatic events. Did populations consolidate around the most reliable water sources during dry periods? Did they abandon certain flood-prone areas entirely after a major shift in rainfall patterns? The laser can map these strategic retreats and resilient holdouts, revealing a narrative of adaptation written into the very shape of the Earth. This long-term perspective is the true gift of this rediscovered past. It provides us with invaluable, real-world case studies of how human societies, at the scale of millions, interact with a changing tropical climate. We see the stark consequences when political rigidity meets environmental crisis, as may have happened with the Maya. But we also see the potential for resilience built on ecological diversity, landscape engineering, and flexible, decentralized food systems, as suggested in the Amazon. These are not simple lessons to copy, but profound contexts to consider. They show us that the relationship between a civilization and its climate is never a single event, but a continuous conversation. The choices made in how to build, how to farm, and how to govern determine whether a society bends under pressure or breaks. As we face our own era of profound environmental change, these silent cities offer a sobering reflection. They remind us that scale alone is no guarantee of survival, but that the wisdom etched into the land just might be. The most profound discoveries are those we can finally see. This is where laser scanning transcends academic journals and enters the public imagination, transforming raw data into a shared visual experience. The true power of LiDAR is not locked in a spreadsheet of coordinates. It is released in the breathtaking animations and interactive models that bring these lost worlds back to light. Imagine a documentary scene that once would have shown a lone archaeator brushing dirt from a stone slab. Now that same scene can pull back, the camera soaring up through a digital recreation of the towering canopy, then diving down as the trees dissolve into transparency, revealing a sprawling metropolis of pyramids, causeways, and neighborhoods materializing from the digital mist. This is not speculation, it is visualization built directly from millions of precise laser measurements. A static map in a textbook tells one story, but a three-dimensional fly-through that lets you glide along an ancient highway, seeing how it connects a residential district to a ceremonial center, tells an entirely different one. It conveys scale, relationship, and planning in an instant. That instant is a revolution in public understanding. For the first time, a global audience can grasp the true magnitude of these civilizations not through abstract numbers, but through visceral, undeniable sight. A museum exhibit is no longer confined to displaying a few excavated artifacts behind glass. It can now place you in the center of a digital plaza, surrounded by the ghostly outlines of structures that once stood there, with projections showing how the city might have looked at its peak. This immersive experience bridges a gap that text alone cannot cross. It makes the past feel present, complex, and deeply human. This visual democratization of archaeology means that a student in a classroom, a history enthusiast at home, or a member of a descendant community can all explore these landscapes with the same fundamental tool, curiosity. The technology becomes a gateway, not a barrier. By making the invisible visible, LiDAR does more than advance research. It performs a crucial act of cultural restoration. It returns a sense of grandeur and sophistication to peoples and places that were long marginalized in the popular historical narrative. When you watch a city of 60,000 structures unfold on your screen, the old idea of a sparse, primitive jungle society becomes impossible to sustain. This visual evidence rewrites popular history more effectively than any argument because it allows people to witness the discovery for themselves. It sparks wonder, fuels responsible tourism, and perhaps most importantly, it inspires. A child who sees a lost city revealed from beneath a forest might just see a future for themselves in science, technology, or the protection of cultural heritage. The laser scan, in the end, is a lens, and by turning that lens toward the past and sharing the view with everyone, we do not just illuminate forgotten cities, we illuminate the enduring human capacity to build, adapt, and leave a mark upon the world that even the deepest jungle cannot completely erase. That digital fly-through comes with a very real price tag. Uncovering a continent's hidden history from the air is a monumental undertaking, one that requires significant investment. The specialized survey aircraft, the sophisticated laser equipment, the immense computing power to process billions of data points, and the teams of experts to interpret it all, represent a major financial commitment for any research institution or government. A single large-scale survey can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, a figure that makes the work a constant balancing act between ambition and budget. Yet to measure its value only in historical terms is to see just one dimension of its worth. The high-resolution terrain models generated by these flights are not merely maps of the past, they are vital tools for navigating the present. The same bare earth model that reveals an ancient causeway also shows the exact topography of the modern landscape with pinpoint accuracy. This data is gold for contemporary land use planners and conservationists. Governments can use it to plan sustainable infrastructure projects, avoiding sensitive areas altogether. Forestry departments can monitor deforestation and forest health with unprecedented detail, tracking illegal logging or the effects of a changing climate. In regions prone to landslides or flooding, these models help identify risks and plan for community resilience. Perhaps most urgently, this technology acts as a powerful early warning system for cultural heritage itself. By scanning areas slated for new roads, dams, or agricultural expansion, researchers can identify archaeological sites long before the bulldozers arrive. This enables a shift from reactive salvage archaeology, often a race against time, to proactive preservation. Communities and governments can make informed choices, potentially rerouting a project to protect an irreplaceable site, or at least ensuring it is properly documented before any ground is broken. This practical application transforms LiDAR from a purely academic instrument into a tool of modern stewardship. The investment also seeds the future in other ways. The drive to process ever larger datasets pushes innovations in computing and artificial intelligence, benefits that spill over into other scientific fields. It is training a new generation of researchers who are not just archaeologists or geographers, but data scientists, remote sensing specialists, and digital humanists. This interdisciplinary workforce is essential for the complex challenges of the 21st century. The argument for funding, therefore, rests on this powerful duality. Every dollar spent to map a lost city also purchases a hyper-accurate blueprint of a living, breathing ecosystem. It supports technology that can safeguard both ancient history and future biodiversity. In a world where tropical forests face unprecedented pressure, this laser in the sky offers a unique form of clarity. It proves that protecting our cultural heritage and protecting our natural world are not separate missions, but deeply intertwined goals. The path forward is written in the light we cast upon the land, a light that shows us where we have been to better decide where we are going. Every revolutionary discovery arrives with a chorus of questions, and this one is no different. The stunning LiDAR maps have not simply been accepted as final answers. They have ignited a vital and necessary debate within the archaeological community itself. This is the sound of science at work, a healthy skepticism that ensures our new story is built on the most solid ground possible. Some researchers point out that the natural world is full of surprising shapes. A cluster of termite mounds viewed from above, or an unusual geological ridge, could potentially be mistaken for a human-made platform or causeway in the raw data. This caution pushes teams to ground truth with even greater rigor, confirming each digital signature with physical evidence from the soil. The debate grows even more nuanced around those staggering population estimates. While the laser can count structures, interpreting what they represent requires careful models. Does every raised platform signify a full-time residence, or could some have been storage buildings, seasonal shelters, or even ceremonial spaces that were not permanently inhabited? More critically, the question of simultaneity returns, even with improved dating, proving that tens of thousands of structures were all occupied in the same 50-year window is a complex challenge. Scholars are diligently refining their formulas, factoring in variables like family size, structure function, and the likely lifespan of buildings made from organic materials. These discussions are not about dismissing the scale of discovery, but about defining it with precision. Similarly, conversations are unfolding about the very nature of these managed landscapes. How intensive was the human modification? Were these societies lightly gardening the forest or actively re-engineering it on an industrial scale? Researchers examine soil cores, pollen records, and plant distributions to better understand the carrying capacity of these environments. They debate whether the enriched terra preta soils were created intentionally as a farming technology or as a byproduct of long-term settlement. This push and pull is how knowledge matures. The conversation has decisively moved past the old question of whether these jungles held significant populations. The field is now grappling with the far more exciting and detailed questions of exactly how large, how interconnected, and how sustainably these societies functioned. Each critique leads to a more refined survey, a more targeted excavation, a sharper analytical model. This debate is not a weakness in the new narrative. It is the process that gives the narrative its enduring strength, ensuring that when we speak of millions in the ancient jungle, we are building that one verified home, one dated seed, and one confirmed canal at a time. The silent stones and empty causeways hold a profound human question. Who moved them? The sheer scale of earthworks revealed by laser scanning points to a monumental investment of collective effort, and that effort had to be organized. This is where the digital map of infrastructure becomes a potential blueprint for an ancient social contract. To build a 50-kilometer raised highway through dense jungle, or to excavate a network of canals feeding thousands of acres of fields, requires more than just willing hands. It requires a system, a shared purpose that could coordinate labor across seasons and generations. The laser cannot show us the faces of the workers, but the patterns it reveals can hint at the structure of the society that directed them. In the classic Maya world, the social model appears more familiar to our historical eye. The LiDAR maps often show a clear hierarchy in the landscape. A single, immense pyramid complex sits at the center, surrounded by elaborate palaces and spacious plazas, all connected by the widest, most prominent causeways. This radial design, with everything leading to and from a powerful core, visually echoes a society organized around a centralized authority, perhaps a divine king who could command labor for grand projects as an expression of both piety and power. The social stratification is written into the very layout of the city, yet in many of the newly discovered Amazonian sites, the pattern is intriguingly different. The laser scans of places like the Casarabe territory or the Garden Cities show a more distributed, networked design. Yes, there are large central plazas and tall platform mounds, but they are not overwhelmingly dwarfed by a single, gargantuan royal palace. Instead, the settlements often appear as clusters of similarly sized residential platforms around communal spaces, linked together by those long, straight causeways into a regional web. The absence of obvious, singular seats of extreme elite power in these scans has led some researchers to propose these societies might have been more hierarchical. This means power and decision-making could have been shared or distributed among different groups, perhaps based on family lineage, age, or specialized knowledge, rather than concentrated in one supreme ruler. The labor to build their world might have been mobilized not by royal decree, but through complex systems of reciprocal obligation, communal benefit, or shared spiritual conviction. A community might come together to maintain the causeway that connected them to their neighbors for trade, or to expand a fish pond that would feed multiple families, understanding that their own well-being was tied to the health of the whole network. This distinction is not about labeling one model better than another, but about appreciating the diversity of human solutions for achieving large-scale cooperation. The laser helps us map this by revealing subtle clues. Archaeologists can analyze the LiDAR data to measure and compare. They look at the size and complexity of residential platforms across a site. Are there a few enormous ones that clearly housed an elite alongside thousands of small, simple ones? Or is there a more continuous range of sizes, suggesting less extreme wealth disparity? They examine access to infrastructure. Do the widest, best-maintained causeways lead only to the largest mounds, or do they serve the entire community equally? These spatial relationships, visible from above, offer proxy evidence for social relationships on the ground. The possibility of large-scale, landscape-altering projects emerging from more communal social models is a powerful and somewhat revolutionary idea. It challenges a long-held assumption that environmental engineering on a grand scale necessitates a coercive, top-down state apparatus. It suggests that human beings are capable of extraordinary collective action driven by shared identity, mutual benefit, and a deep understanding of their interdependence with the environment they were shaping. The silent, sprawling gardens and roads we now see may be the physical testament to a different kind of political genius, one built on consensus and long-term stewardship rather than consolidation of power. This realization opens a fascinating window not just into how these cities were built, but why they were built that way, pointing us toward the beliefs and values that held these vast, hidden worlds together. The laser's view is not a single story, but a new kind of language spoken by many fields at once. This is not merely archaeology with a better tool. The true power of LiDAR lies in how it forces disciplines that once worked in parallel to finally converge on the same map. An ecologist studying forest health and an archaeologist searching for lost cities are now looking at the exact same digital landscape, asking complementary questions. Where the archaeologist sees the geometric footprint of an ancient plaza, the ecologist might notice a distinct cluster of certain tree species growing right on that spot, species known to thrive in human-disturbed soils. This is not a coincidence. It is a conversation between the human past and the biological present, written in the language of light pulses and tree roots. The data becomes a shared resource. Computer scientists develop sophisticated algorithms to automatically detect not just pyramids, but also subtle variations in canopy height that signal past human enrichment of the soil. Geographers use the precise elevation models to simulate ancient water flow, understanding how a civilization managed its most precious resource. Each specialist brings a different lens, and together, they assemble a picture far richer than anyone could create alone. This convergence shatters the old academic silos. The jungle can no longer be neatly divided into an archaeological site here and a biological preserve there. It is revealed as what it always was, an integrated historical ecosystem, a single, complex entity where human history and natural history are permanently entwined. The enriched terra preta soils are an archaeological artifact, an ecological phenomenon, and a lesson in sustainable chemistry all at once. The straight causeways are feats of engineering, markers of social organization, and corridors that still influence animal movement today. This holistic view is what transforms fascinating history into urgent relevance. By studying how these societies achieved such scale and longevity within a demanding environment, we are not just satisfying curiosity about the past. We are gathering case studies in long-term resilience. We can ask what specific practices, from polycultural farming to decentralized water management, allowed populations to thrive for centuries. And what were the pressure points, perhaps political rigidity or over-reliance on a single resource, that made them vulnerable when the climate shifted? These are not academic riddles, they are practical questions for a modern world facing its own ecological pressures. The laser, in the end, is a catalyst for a new kind of wisdom. It shows us that the solutions to our greatest challenges may not lie in inventing something entirely new, but in remembering something very old, a way of seeing the world not as a collection of separate problems, but as a deeply connected, living system. The silence that followed the peak is a question written in the negative space of all that splendor. With these societies now understood to have been so populous and so deeply connected, their eventual retreat from the landscape transforms from a footnote into a central historical enigma. How does a world built for millions, woven into the very fabric of the forest, come to a close? The laser shows us the magnificent stage at the height of the performance, but the final act, the quiet lowering of the curtain, is recorded in other, more fragile archives. The search for answers is leading scientists to combine the laser's map of human achievement with a different kind of record, one kept by nature itself. Researchers are turning to the mud at the bottom of ancient lakes and ponds. In these still, dark waters, a continuous history has settled layer by layer, year by year, for millennia. By extracting long cores of this sediment, they can read it like a book. Pollen grains preserved in the muck tell a story of changing plant life, revealing when vast tracts of maize agriculture or managed orchards began to shrink, giving way to different forest regrowth. Microscopic charcoal particles speak of fire, whether from intentional clearing or catastrophic wildfires sparked by drought. These natural archives provide a timeline of environmental pressure independent of any human structure, allowing scientists to ask if a century of intense dry spells coincided with the depopulation of a LiDAR-mapped city. This paleoclimatic data provides the context, the backdrop against which the human drama unfolded. Another crucial line of evidence comes from a source even closer to the people themselves, their genetic legacy. Studies of ancient DNA, carefully extracted from skeletal remains, are beginning to trace the movement and health of populations over time. This genetic record can potentially detect the devastating arrival of new pathogens, like those introduced after European contact, by showing sudden, severe bottlenecks in population diversity. It can also reveal longer-term patterns of mobility and isolation, showing how connected or fragmented these vast networks were in their final centuries. The goal is a forensic reconstruction of an ending. By overlaying the precise LiDAR map of peak occupation with the climatic story from the lake cores and the demographic story from genetics, researchers hope to sequence the collapse. Did a series of crippling droughts visible in the sediment erode faith in leaders and strain the agricultural systems first? Did that environmental stress then ignite social conflicts, evidenced by the defensive walls the laser reveals? Or, as seems tragically clear in much of the Amazon, did a single external factor, like introduced disease, sweep through the interconnected highways and gardens with a swiftness that no society could withstand. Solving this mystery is more than an academic pursuit. These civilizations represent profound experiments in sustainability at a massive scale. Understanding precisely where the pressures became too great, which links in their complex system failed first, offers us a sobering case study. Our modern world is itself a vast, interconnected network, deeply vulnerable to climatic shifts, resource depletion, and global shocks. The silent cities in the jungle stand as monuments not just to human achievement, but to human fragility. They ask us what it truly takes for a civilization to endure across the centuries, and whether we are listening to the echoes of their choices. This same digital record now stands as a permanent guardian. The high-resolution maps created by laser scanning do far more than reveal. They establish an immutable baseline, a snapshot of a landscape at a precise moment in time. This becomes a powerful tool for protection. Conservation groups and government agencies can schedule repeat LiDAR flights over the same sensitive areas, perhaps every few years. By comparing the new data with the original scan, sophisticated software can automatically flag minute changes in the terrain. A sudden cluster of small, deep pits appearing in a remote area, invisible under the canopy from satellite photos, would stand out immediately in the digital elevation model. These are the unmistakable signatures of looter trenches, dug to plunder artifacts for the illegal market. Similarly, the scans can detect the initial, clandestine cuts of new logging roads or the telltale patterns of unauthorized clearing long before they expand into vast scars. This early detection system, powered by the laser's precision, allows for a rapid response. Authorities can be alerted to investigate and intervene before irreparable damage is done. Beyond monitoring, the data itself is a form of legal armor. By providing exact coordinates, dimensions, and undeniable visual proof of a site's existence and scale, LiDAR maps empower indigenous communities and national heritage bodies to make a stronger, evidence-based case for formal protection. They can petition for official designation as a protected archaeological zone, which can legally restrict destructive activities. In this crucial way, the tool of discovery transforms into a tool of active preservation. It ensures that these cities, having waited centuries to be seen, are not lost a second time to contemporary threats. The laser's light does not merely illuminate the past, it casts a protective shadow over it, helping to safeguard this irreplaceable heritage both for the future of global understanding and for the cultural memory of the descendants who never forgot it was there. The map has been redrawn, and the old story of empty wilderness is gone forever. What the laser's eye has given us is nothing less than a second volume of human history, one written not in stone on open plains, but in soil and root beneath a living canopy. From the sprawling, interconnected metropolis of the classic Maya to the vast garden cities and causeway networks of the Amazon, the evidence is now undeniable. These places were not backwaters, they were pulsating centers of human innovation, home to millions who sculpted their world with a sophistication we are only beginning to grasp. This is far more than an academic footnote or a simple adjustment to a population chart. It is a fundamental recalibration of our understanding of what civilization can look like and where it can flourish. It shatters the idea that complexity requires clearing the land, proving instead that the greatest ingenuity can lie in integration. The dense tropical forest, once seen as a barrier, is now revealed as the foundation for some of humanity's most ambitious and sustainable experiments in living together. These silent cities challenge us on multiple fronts. They ask us to reconsider the resilience of tropical ecosystems, showing that the breathtaking biodiversity we strive to protect today may itself be a legacy of millennia of human care and cultivation. They ask us to expand our definition of a monument, To see that a 50-kilometer straight road through jungle or a managed food forest that feeds a city are achievements as monumental as any pyramid. And perhaps most pressingly, they offer us a mirror as we navigate our own era of environmental change and resource pressure. These ancient societies present profound, if complex, lessons. We see the stark consequences when political and ecological systems fall out of sync, but we also see blueprints for resilience built on diversity, decentralized networks, and a deep partnership with the natural world. The initial scan is complete, the lost cities have been found, but the true work of interpretation, of weaving this new evidence into the rich tapestry of the human story, has only just begun. This is a living discovery, one you can explore for yourself. We encourage you to seek out the stunning visualizations and maps created from this LiDAR data, to fly digitally over these reclaimed landscapes and see the scale for yourself. Let us know in the comments which of these rediscovered civilizations captures your imagination the most. The journey to the frontiers of history continues, where light and data are peeling back the shadows, revealing that our past is far more crowded, creative, and connected than we ever dreamed.